So, welcome to another choir practice episode. Cheers. Our first ever guest. We'll see how this plays out. So, I'm Lima Charlie. This is Choir Practice Podcast, and it is December 2022. Time is flying, and currently it's cold and starting to snow outside. So, anyway. Welcome to this. I appreciate everybody who checks these out and leaves comments and watches them. It's slowly making progress and learning how to do this whole podcast thing. So, anyway, I want to start off with a quick rant. So, this is your trigger warning that may offend some people, and if so, then just don't watch this. But what the heck is the deal with lowering standards? I'm getting really fed up with it. Seems like, especially in my profession right now, that not only are people settling with low standards, it seems like we are working towards low standards and making an effort. So I'm not going to go off on that a whole lot, but specifically the absolute lack of fitness standards and accountability with that. So I have certain expectations. I would think that you do for your cops and that our cops have those too, but I'll get back to that later. And then it's been kind of a weird couple of weeks as I go over all the police forums and the different channels out there and stuff like that, and what the holy hell is going on. There's been a lot of ambush attacks on cops recently, and I know that with the lack of prosecution and criminal or accountability for criminals, I expect criminals to push the limits and commit more crimes. But it seems like we have a certain percentage of people that is now actually trying to take a battle or war to the cops. For instance, following a cop into a parking lot with a rifle and then menacing a bunch of people until you get shot. Walking up to a police station and filing a false report saying that someone's harassing you, and then when the cop answers the door, you engage in a shootout. You got people just calling 911 and trying to lure cops in. So it's just, I don't know what the hell is going on out there right now, but it seems like not only are the criminals getting more brazen with their normal criminal behavior, like we talked about in the last episode with all the auto thefts and so forth, but now they're actually targeting cops, following cops home and stuff like that. And I don't know, the pendulum is going to swing, and at some point, the expectations from society, our legislature, and our administrators is that the cops are going to get the green light to fight back, and that's going to be an interesting time. So, without further ado, I teased a few times that we would have guests on here. This is him, our first guest, and him has been a cop for a long time. We've shared kind of similar career paths. He's currently in the business. He's got a pretty extensive history, starting in 1995. So yeah, he's been doing it for a while. Still not slowing down or getting ready to retire anytime real soon. I'll introduce him a little bit, but it's kind of ironic because at my places I've worked, I've always been had a reputation of being a shit magnet or being able to find bad guys quickly. And I said, I'll always be one of those guys who's always in the mix with big calls. And he makes me pale in comparison. He's the true shit magnet. He's been involved in some crazy, crazy stuff. So, quick introduction.
I'm him. Not related to him at all. I started my career, like you said, in 1995 in a small little tourist mountain town. Didn't want to be a cop, but I kind of fell into it. Actually, I started my career as a 911 dispatcher, which got me into becoming a cop. After I did that for a couple of years, I moved to another agency. It's another small tourist town. Cost of living was too much, so I moved down to the metro area, and I got a job working for a, how do you word it when you talk about sheriff's office? It's a metro sheriff's office?
Metro area
sheriff's office. I did that for about 16 years. That's where I got a majority of my experience. I was on a SWAT team, K9, an instructor in several things.
Field training officer.
Yeah, it was fun. The K9 was really awesome in SWAT. But they didn't have really any kind of a retirement or anything like that, and their pay had topped out, so I left there about 7 years ago, and then I went to a city.
A city, the largest city in our state, the the capital city.
And I've been there for about 7 years. So it's been interesting. I went from a small little mountain town down to where you see everything, the shootings, the stabbings, like several of them at night. It's just common. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, so kind of interesting thing with like where I work, our canine deputies are general cars, so they're assigned to a district and they have to handle calls, routine calls for service all over the place. Where he worked was kind of cool because they weren't assigned to a district, so they basically only engaged or got called upon when it was something cool, where they needed a dog or someone was barricaded, stuff like that. So he's got a lot of stories. So what I thought we'd do this time around is kind of go back and forth and try to outdo each other with stories. And I can already tell you he's probably going to win. But stories related to law enforcement. So maybe not all on the job, but something related. Anywhere. He's done a lot of cool training. We've done some training together, gone around and traveled. So it can be a training story, a call for service, or just some sort of bizarre kind of nutty job or call that we've been on, kind of go from there. I'll just kind of go for one and razzle and dazzle with some cool stories. I don't know. Some of them will be fun. Some will be cool. Some will be sad. Some will be what the fuck moments. But we'll just kind of share some stories with you guys and see what you think. And then if you guys like this, let me know, and I can do more of these. Have other people on as well. I'm not opposed to having civilians or non-law enforcement, military, whatever, to get different perspectives of what goes on in law enforcement and so forth. So back to training, I'll say that I've been real fortunate. I've got to travel all around, do a lot of training, and I'll tell you 2 cool training stories that were very contrasting off the top of my head. So I'll lead off with that. So a lot of times within my state, I get sent out to really small rural areas to do training through grants and stuff like that, or places that don't typically have a lot of training opportunities for them. Excuse me. I did get the opportunity to go out to St. Thomas and St. Croix several years ago, and that was really cool. It's obviously a tourist place, a vacation avenue. So we did a week-long training out there for their combined police department. And I will say they have a ton of money dumped into their police department. So they have the top-notch equipment, ballistic doors and windows on the patrol cars. Everything was brand new. But they don't get a lot of training. Thus, we were out there. So we did a week-long training involved edged weapons, ground fighting, hand-to-hand, firearms, tactics, all that stuff, and culminated in a bunch of scenarios. But that was really cool. They put, basically there was 5 of us, I think, instructors that went out there, and they rented a huge house for us, and kind of like a small mansion, huge swimming pool, fully decked out bar. So as you can imagine, you have a bunch of hard chargers training hard, working hard during the day because it was hot and humid. And we were doing 10-hour training days. So at night it was fun. It was just a bunch of hairy-chested knuckle draggers, drinking as much as we could drink, barbecuing really good food, ending up in the pool or screwing around. I won't say there was any fights that broke out, but there was some definitely some tussles of, it started off as playful, and then, egos get involved. So, but it was a week long. It was amazing, and it was really cool. We were spoiled rotten with food and drink in the place we stayed at. And it kind of reminded me of not too far from maybe a week-long frat house, but it was really cool. On the other side, and again, a really cool training trip is I got to go out to Shanto, Arizona, and do some training for the Navajo Nation. And that was really cool. Beautiful, beautiful land, but it was like being in a time machine and going backwards to, back into like 1950s. I think they still have payphones in one of their schools that took nickels. So it's kind of like going backwards. And it was very opposite. We stayed in very sparse quarters. I remember showing up the first night, we bought a huge thing of coffee, and we get there, there's no filters. So we used different things to filter our coffee, from socks to shirts and stuff like that. But it was very different. It was very sparse. It was like being in an army barracks way, way back when. But super cool people, great opportunity. So that was kind of the contrast in the different cool places that I've got to go train. And those are 2 ones that kind of stand out because they're just awesome people and great opportunities.
I know, kind of going off on a tangent about training, but you and I are both heavily into training. We believe in training. specifically in scenario-based training, because that's one of those things that will trick your mind into thinking it's actually happening. And if you can perform well there, then you can perform well in a real-world situation.
Stress inoculation.
So one of my big complaints is most agencies nowadays are going to all these video trainings. They have these mandatory videos that you have to watch, and then they can check the box and say you've received the training. And I know not that long ago I had to do a video training, and it was like a 1 or 2 hour video, and the entire video was about active shooters. And the entire thing was news clips about how other agencies are actually getting out there and training with active shooters. They're going to the schools that are after hours or during summers. They've got role players, they've got the makeup, they've got smoke machines, they've got guns with blanks, and they're doing a good job getting their training. And I sat there and watched this entire video about how other agencies are doing this. And that was my checkoff for my active shooter training for the year. And it just blows me away that we're no longer actually training. Unless it's a politically correct topic, then heaven forbid, we'll be all over it. But fighting, shooting, driving, you know what I mean? The things that will actually keep you alive. Tactics, we don't train anymore. They'll just make you watch a video and that's it. And it's ridiculous.
But I do get weekly invites for racial equity and hiring.
I just had a 3-hour training on that. Oh, am I allowed to go off on a tangent on this?
Huh?
Okay.
You have to drink first.
Okay. These, I'm not saying these videos or these trainings aren't legit, let's have them, whatever, but I had one, and the entire thing, I don't know, was made by anti-police. It was the most horrible training I've ever had. It was all about how horrible cops are, how racist we are, how heavy-handed we are, and this is the training we had to watch. Every video or every clip they showed a cop, where's the cop going? Or they show a close-up of the gun, or they show him doing this, and every single clip or video they showed of the other side was whatever minority you want to put in, and they're all like, oh, like this. And the entire video was just made cops out to be horrible, hate-mongering individuals that want to do nothing but go out and murder people. And then they show a scenario where a cop is doing like a high-risk car stop, and he's got his gun out, and of course they zoom in, and he's like, you know, yelling commands, and the poor innocent person's getting out of the car with their hands up, and they're like, why don't the police try having a dialogue? Why don't they try talking to people? And the video was just the most one-sided video I've ever seen, and this was a mandatory training that was put on to teach us how horrible we are, and I can't believe that.
It's weird that recruiting numbers are down so much and people can't call the applicants anymore.
But on that though, I've done it for 27 years. I've never, ever, ever, in 4 different agencies, I've never come across a coworker or a cop that has truly been, that I've experienced, has been racist or been working solely on hate. I mean, I've never seen it happen. Do they exist? Sure, but I've never experienced it. I've never seen it. And I see cops all the time that will do dialogues. They'll be on a high-risk stop. They'll be pointing their gun at somebody, and the person comes out, and they'll recognize the situation, and they'll, you know, do the voice inflections, and they'll say, you know, hey, I don't want to hurt you. You don't want to hurt me. All you have to do is let me confirm that you don't have a weapon, and then I'll listen to your side of the story. We'll talk. And I hear that, and I see that day in and day out. But you'd never know that. All you see is the cops spitting as they're yelling and cursing and calling people names, and it's just not true.
Well, I've talked about it before. I think there's just a certain amount of people that they thrive on chaos, and they want to drive that wedge between us and the citizens. And because there's no shortage of videos out there, you can get on YouTube and look at police videos where cops do a great job establishing a dialogue, talking to people. And you know, I can't remember what the stat was. It was an FBI stat years ago, but they said in about 97% of the times when a cop is justified in using deadly force, they don't. That's good and bad, because I don't want cops to die either. But I think part of the problem is we have a media that's very selective, and you have people that are uneducated, uninformed, untrained, and have zero experience making these judgments and then projecting that image of cops onto the general masses. That shooting they had in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the media really skewed that. Talked about this was at the Q Club I think it was an alternative lifestyle club in Colorado Springs where a guy went in there and shot, killed a bunch of people like 2-3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the media really was like, well, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office had arrested this guy before and failed because they should have taken his guns. And when the agency was legally able to talk about that previous contact and explain it, it makes total sense. They did everything within their power. They went above and beyond. But the media portrayed it in a very negative light. So that's really frustrating. You can tell we're both kind of passionate about the training and stuff like that. But back onto the story. So really cool training experience.
Oh my god.
Funny, good, awesome location.
Okay, so when I was, I don't know. I don't know if we can do training stories. When I was I gotta go back and forth. When I was a canine handler, we used to travel to another state. Can I say names of places?
Okay, that's what you.
So we went and got our dogs from Von Lick Kennels, I think in Indiana. Great place. They treated us like gold, and they had really good dogs. But we'd spend a week out there, trying to get our dogs narrowed down. You start with 100 dogs and go down to 20 dogs, then go down to 5 dogs, and you spend an entire. It's kind of like what you're talking about. You spend 12, 14-hour days, putting on bite suits, getting bit by several different dogs, trying to find out which dogs have high drives and the correct drives, and all this other stuff. And then at night, we'd go to these little hole-in-the-wall bars with the locals. And
Well, they serve non-alcoholic beverages.
yes. But this one time we went out there and we had to drive out there. We couldn't fly because we had to drive the dogs back. And they gave us this, it was technically a SWAT vehicle, but it was unmarked. Big Ford Expedition, or what's the big one? Excursion? The bigger of the two. But yeah, we had a lot of fun there and met some locals, and one of those, what stays in Indiana or happens in Indiana stays in Indiana
right.
type of thing.
So I'm going to up that. I'm going to win this one, this bout. So I worked in a very small mountain town up in the mountains. We had, I think, 6 people. We had a chief, sergeant, 4 cops, and it was a very slow tempo. So it wasn't uncommon for me to go an entire work week and not hear anything on the radio. So I got really excited when we would get it. And I was a brand new cop. This was like 1995, 96, I don't know, somewhere around there.
I have no direct recollection.
Anyway, so I'm working. It was New Year's Day, and I got stuck working. So I'm sitting down in this town. It's early in the morning, and just trying to stay awake and feeling a lot of self-pity because I'm working, no one else is. And I get this call. Dispatch is like, I can't remember what badge number was, 309 or something like that. We have a ready report. So a ready report is when a citizen says, hey, I see a car driving and I think they're drunk because they're weaving and driving erratically. Keep your eyes out because obviously we don't want drunk drivers out there. So I'm like, okay, cool. And it was like a large blacked out SUV coming down the hill from the Aspen area. So there's a lot of parties.
Killer 82. Okay.
Yeah, Killer 82 was the name of the highway. So anyway, I'm staged on the side of the highway. I'm like, cool, I got nothing going on. And I see this SUV freaking flying down. I'm like, yeah, I got him. So I flip him behind him, and I'm driving a Ford Taurus at the time, so I gun it. And, if you ever drove one of those, they don't have a lot of pick-me-up. But anyway, after like 3 miles of me being able to get up fast enough to catch up to this SUV, I air it to dispatch, hey, I got this car, initiating a car stop, and hit my lights. They pull over immediately. But they were speeding and driving kind of erratic. And so the hairs on the back of my neck are going up a little bit because this dark tinted windows, and I get out.
You got to pay attention to that.
You have to pay attention to the etheric sense, right? Officer safety. So I'm walking up, and the whole SUV is like shifting. I'm like, what the heck is going on in there? There's some really big NFL dudes partying or a rolling disturbance. I don't know what it is. So I go walking up, and I'm all like, do my officer safety. I'm dialed in, walking up, making my approach, angled out, touch the back, and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, the windows roll down. And there's some things in life that you witness, that you see, that are just etched into your mind's eye that you will never be able to unsee. And as the windows slowly come down, I'm like, oh man, guns are going to come out. I'm going to be in a gun battle. Nope, it's a bunch of Aspen cops that I know that are really, really drunk and all but naked.
What?
And the whole thing was a ploy to screw with me. So yeah, it's a bunch of cops that had been partying the night before. At least they had a designated driver. The person driving the SUV was sober, but they were
Naked.
They were naked.
Did you see things?
And I saw things that I can never unsee. So that was an interesting Ready report. And again, if I ever need counseling or trauma therapy at some point, that may be one of the reasons. What else?
I'm glad I didn't experience that.
Yeah, not from that side of the window.
That's horrible.
You might have seen it from the other side of the window. But yeah.
So if I wasn't there, granted, but I heard from sources that the officer that stopped him was standing there in shock with his jaw hanging open. And as the SUV drove away, the occupants inside the SUV looked back and saw him standing there as far as they drove, just standing there going,
I can confirm
didn't move.
that. I can totally confirm
like he
that.
was like a goat. He saw a ghost or something.
Yeah, it was a long 10-hour shift after that, trying to get over that. So, let's see. So that's one story. I forgot about that one. I'm going to save my gold story for the end because it's a shocker. It will shock you and trigger you and make you say, what the... we had a call just last week, and this was a 911 call. Okay. So my experience is that 911 is for when someone's bleeding from the ears, someone's breaking an ear, you're being robbed, or you need help right now. Armed law enforcement officers
Rushing
to
your aid.
And this one was last week, came in and said that there is a coyote on the side of the road trying to cross, and he can't get across the road. And this lady really wanted law enforcement to show up and stop traffic and guide this coyote across the road. So,
which the coyote would probably have just listened.
I'm sure the coyote would listen. So they are among us, and the scary thing is they do produce kids and offspring sometimes. But there's people out there that will call emergency services to help a coyote cross the road because, and they do post those signs up that are supposed to tell the animals where to cross.
Don't cross over there.
Right. So maybe this was just not a very smart coyote or timid. Maybe it's been hit by a car once before. Had some post-traumatic stress going on. So
when I was a 911 dispatcher, I remember, and by the way, hats off to 911 dispatchers.
I can't do that job.
They it's one thing to deal with something crazy as a cop because you get to go and get hands-on and get closure and stuff, but imagine if you're listening to something on the phone and then you're listening to the friends and coworkers responding and you're sitting there and there's nothing you could do. You're just so helpless. But anyway, when I was a 911 dispatcher, we had this person that would call 911 and just total, I guess what they call them now is Karen, but just screaming and yelling and adamant that they wanted their downstairs neighbor arrested. And we're like, oh, okay, what's going on? Well, it turned out that the downstairs neighbor liked to cook. And the odor from their cooking was just too much. It was horrible. So I tried explaining to the person, I was like, well, listen, first of all, this isn't a police matter. Weird. But definitely 911 is for emergencies. Well, what do you mean emergencies? Well, let me give you some examples, I don't know, if somebody was assaulting you, somebody was physically assaulting you, that's the time to call 911. Well, I am being assaulted. Their odors are assaulting my nose. Send a police officer out here right now and arrest them. That's the kind of stuff they have to deal with.
Yeah, 911 dispatch. We had a call, kind of on that note, last week, 2 weeks ago, it was a homicide. Or a lady called 911, and she said her ex-boyfriend had shown up, and as dispatch is on the phone with her, they hear a gunshot. He executed her new boyfriend and then shot her while she was on the phone and then took off. So they do.
I had a guy didn't speak English, called 911, and he has a little broken English. Basically, I could get that he didn't want to live anymore. And as he was talking to me, you hear a gunshot, and then his wife was screaming, and it went from screaming to screaming, you know what I mean? And she came and picked up the phone, and I tried to figure out what was going on, and all I could get was her saying that he had shot himself. So he called 911 and killed himself right in front of his wife. And we have this thing called emergency medical dispatching where you have to try to render aid on the phone, but you go through these questions, and so I'm trying to ask her, breathing? Is he conscious? And everything I asked was yes, 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 yes. And I said, well, where did he get shot? In the face. And I was like, finally it clicked. I was like, she's just saying yes, and
she doesn't know what
she's not going to render aid to him.
She was in shock.
So we tried to just get her out of the room so she's not staring at it anymore. But that was probably one of that and the hot air balloons that crashed. But those are probably the two worst dispatcher calls.
Yeah, they definitely hear some stuff. So, all right. So I'll try to mix up some funny stories, not with just the gross ones, but or the horror ones. So we got the coyote crossing the street. That's pretty awesome. All right, so here's kind of a cool one. So this is back in 2019. We were hunting for this guy, and he's a dirtbag, career dirtbag. So I think he had 4 felony warrants out for his arrest, and was associated with a couple stolen vehicles. And then that morning, we have him on at some of the trailheads where people park their cars to go hiking. A lot of people, like, their bad guys know people are going to be hiking, so they break windows and steal purses and stuff like that. Well, we had video of this guy, pictures on a game camera of him breaking into a car and all this good stuff. So we were looking for this guy, and he was associated with his red F-250 that was stolen out of a neighboring jurisdiction. And one of my partners, who someday hopefully I'll have him on here, did some amazing legwork. He used some law enforcement databases and found like an associated address in a city in our jurisdiction, and I think it was his sister's house. So he drove by and he sees the stolen F-250 there. So he's like, maybe this guy is going to be coming back. So long story short, we had this elaborate stakeout, waiting for him to come back. 4 hours later, he never came back. Turns out he was inside the whole time. So after we cleared most of our resources, we went up to do a knock and talk with his sister, and we were going to impound the truck. Long story short, we saw him trying to exit a basement window. He barricaded himself in there, so we were trying to get everybody back in place to do a call out and get him to come out. And at one point, we have 4 felony warrants, a couple criminal trespasses, which are felonies in the state, or they used to be, and a couple of stolen trucks that he was associated with. So we had awesome charges. So anyway, at one point, he comes out the front with his hands up, like he's going to give out, and it was all a ploy. He had a remote started his sister's car, jumped in that, stole that car because she didn't give him permission, and get into his short pursuit. So as he's driving through these town streets, he at this time of the day, it was like 2:30 in the afternoon. There was an elementary school that was getting out, like 2 blocks from his sister's house. So he's cruising through there, and I'm like 4 cars behind him. I lost visual of him, and he gets boxed in this weird residential neighborhood where you take a left on the street and then turns to the right. So he's blocked in on 2 sides by houses, and then the city police have him blocked in on a 3rd side. So I'm pulling on the street and like, oh, cool, we got him. There's nowhere for him to go. As I was pulling on the street, I see 2 groups of kids and parents walking along the street, leaving the school, because like I said, we're a block away from the school. I'm like, there's nowhere this guy can go. We got him. The only thing he could do is throw it in reverse and drive back towards me and towards these groups of kids. And lo and behold, I see the reverse lights come on, and he guns it. And I'm like, oh shit, he's going to run over these kids because he's running in reverse. He'd already flattened one of his tires, and he's got no regard for public safety. So I was like, well, I had half a second to think about this. I said, I'm not going to let him run over these kids. I angled my car and to intercept him. And I rammed him with my Tahoe. And matter of fact, here, scoot over a little bit. Okay. This is good old 538. One of my partners made this. This is off the front bumper, and this is a piece of metal off my car. So we retired that patrol vehicle that day. I rammed him, totaled both cars, but I got him stopped, got him into custody. Subsequently, like a year later, he was sentenced, and he got the max. The judge was pretty cool. The judge was like, "We're under no illusions that you're going to go to jail and mend your ways and become a better person, but at least while you're gone, society will be safe." So, I think he got 12 or 14 years time in DOC. So that was kind of a cool one. And I got a new patrol car after that. So, because we had to retire the other one. All right, you're up. You guys keep track. Whose stories are winning? Okay, on a scale.
I thought that was going to be a funny one.
That was a fun one.
Oh, fun.
It was fun. It wasn't gruesome or traumatizing. I meant no, though. My airbags never deployed. I mean, my car was totaled. It was kind of weird.
Full of enough hot air as it is.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Oh.
Anyway.
Oh, fun. I don't know. Like I told you, when we were talking about telling stories, I get them clumped into all these different categories. There's like really sad, heart-wrenching stories, and there's, SWAT stories, and I think I'll do.
It's either that he's got so many stories, or he's been hit in the head enough times that he's having a hard time sorting through them.
I'll tell I call it the. I give them names.
The chupacabra.
Yeah, I give them names. So I've been involved in 6 shootings. Not fired my gun 6 times. I've just been on calls where shots are being exchanged or whatever 6 times. So this one is called the Super 8 because it's the name of a hotel.
Ooh. One of my lights
Right when we did that.
one of my lights just blocked it out. So
okay, so I was working at the sheriff's office, and so when I worked there, I told you I was K9 and SWAT, but K9 was full time, but SWAT was a part time. So you didn't do that full time. You just you trained, and then you had your gear with you, and if there was a call out, you go. So I was working as patrol as a deputy. And dispatch gave me a call of an attempt to contact or attempt to locate. And they wanted me to go to this hotel, the Super 8. And this is how the call came out. I'll never forget. They're like, this other agency is requesting you to go to this hotel and contact this individual that they're looking for. And that was pretty much the information they gave me. So I pulled up the notes on my computer to get the rest of it. And it turns out this other agency wanted this guy for homicide, a couple homicides. He was at this hotel. He had rented 2 different rooms. They didn't know which of the 2 rooms he was in. He was heavily armed, and there was a female with him, and they didn't know if the female was with him by choice or if she had been kidnapped. And so that's what dispatch was sending me, a solo deputy to go knock on the door and, hi, are you here?
I would typically be like a SWAT call out.
So the lieutenant or watch commander that was working on the road was also our SWAT lieutenant, and I got along with him really well. He's a really, really cool dude. I called him up on the phone, and I'm like, hey, Lieutenant, why don't you take a look at this call I got? So he's like, yeah, let me call you back. So he calls me back, and he's like, do not go to that hotel. This is definitely a SWAT call. And he calls dispatch, and he's, don't send anybody there. This is a SWAT call. And long story short, we do a SWAT call out. And it turned out this guy wasn't just wanted for homicide. He was actually a serial killer. Like, I don't know what the definition of that is, but he had killed a couple different people. So he was actually defined as a serial killer, I think. And he was on the 2nd floor, and there was 2 hotel rooms that he had rented. We didn't know which one he was. Is your basement haunted?
I think it is.
We didn't know which room he was in. We didn't know if the girl with him was with him willingly or not. So came up with this plan and
keep telling your story.
Came up with this plan, and we started having the hotel contact all these people on the 2nd floor and evacuate them and get them out quietly down to a safe place. And then the SWAT team, we're going up both stairwells. And the rooms were on the 2nd floor, kind of halfway down. We didn't know there was one on the left side, one on the right side. And so we're going up the stairwells. And then we're going to come up with a game plan, or we had a game plan, whatever. So as there's two elements were coming up the stairs and just coming up to that 2nd floor, not even in position yet, just barely coming up there, the suspect comes out holding a pizza box. And he looks at the SWAT team, and the SWAT team looks at him, and there's this, oh shit. So the SWAT operator that's up front, he's like, oh, sheriff's office, you're under arrest. Put your hands up, walk towards us. So of course he does not comply. He throws the pizza box down, goes back into his room, and barricades himself inside. You can just hear him stacking furniture and all this stuff up against the door. So we come up with a plan. We're going to do we still have to be aware of the room that was on the other side too, because we don't know if his accomplice was over there or not. But we were going to do an explosive entry, which was awesome. I love doing explosive entries. Our bomb guy that was in charge of that was a genius. I'll call him Mr. White.
Mr. White.
But he was so good at the bombs. Anyway, so we're going to do an explosive entry, and then they decided the adjoining room, and you have to remind me what these things are called. We were going to go into the adjoining room, and they've got like these...
That's the room next door.
Yeah. And then we got these big like syringe things that are like needles that are like this big, and you shove it through the drywall, and then you can pump gas in.
We have an inappropriate name for that on our team.
Okay, we will.
Because it's attached to a vehicle and it's phallic looking.
Right.
Anyway,
so we were gonna do an explosive entry, but we were also gonna shove this thing through the drywall and start pumping gas in to make life uncomfortable for him. So my assignment was, I was gonna hold the shield and block the guy that was turning on the gas. So if he started, because he was supposed to have several handguns, rifles, shotguns. I mean, he was armed to the T. But so if he started shooting through the drywall, we didn't want the guy pumping the gas to get shot. So we go into the other room. We're getting set up. I got the shield. He's getting ready to shove this thing through the wall. And they tell us, no, we're not putting gas in. We're just going to do an explosive entry, and then we're going to go in. Oh, very, very important part. The intel from the hotel told us on the second floor, his window was non-accessible. You couldn't go out that window because there was this big A-frame design thing right in front of his window, and they said it butted right up to the window, so there was literally no room. So he couldn't open the window and go out because we had that as a concern. So we didn't think the window was an option. We get set up to do the explosive entry. Because he was barricading it, the bomb guy went a little hot. So they told us, they're like, okay, everyone else has to get way back and get cover because the percussion or whatever, it's got nowhere to go down the halls. And they told us in the next room, they're like, go into the bathroom and get behind the shield. And they're like, close your eyes.
how hot did he go? Because standoff is usually what, 10 feet?
This was hot. But they told us, they're like, go into the bathroom, get behind the shield, close your eyes, open your mouth, cover your balls. So we do that, and they do the countdown, and I just remember that whole building shook. And I opened my eyes, and it was daylight. This is a daytime operation. I opened my eyes, and it was pitch black. Like you couldn't see anything, and then you just see debris and stuff floating, and you kind of slowly start seeing little bits of light, and I'm like, holy Shazamo. So as soon as the explosion went off, we're supposed to run back into the hall, jump behind one of the elements, and go make entry into the room. So we come out of the bathroom, and the guy I was with books it out to the hallway, does what he's supposed to do, get into the element. And for whatever reason, I look to my right, and the window, I see somebody run by. And I'm like, wait a minute. He's not supposed to be able to access that. Well, it turns out there was like a ledge that was like this big. So he had jumped out his window, and he was now on the ledge. So he ran by my window, and the window frame, when he passed my field of view and got like just right out of my view, immediately I heard pop, 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 and I see flashes of lights. And I'm sure you've experienced this before, but when you know that somebody is trying to kill fellow cops and friends, you get rage. Like I just wanted to go kill him. I mean, I'd like to word it more politically correct, but I wanted to go kill him to prevent him from killing the cops that were in the parking lot because, we had perimeter set up. So I went running over to the window, and as I get to the window, I'd still just, and you see all the flashes. So my goal is I'm going to open the window, just reach out, and then just contact shoot him, and just put an end to it. So I go open the window, and it goes clink, clink, and I look down, and they had those darn childproof locks on the rail. And I was like, and I can see the cops in the parking lot, and they're coming up like this, and he's still shooting, and I don't know what, and I put my shield down, and I grabbed the window, and I just ripped it off the railing, and I was like, as soon as I get this window off, I'm going to contact shoot him. So I'm like, I rip it off, and I look down, and I see the cops in the parking lot pointing their guns up, and they're boom, 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 and I see the flashes, and it dawns on me, this guy's like 1.5 feet away from me, and they're shooting at him.
I hope these are the marksmen on the agency.
I gave a healthy scream. I went, ah! And I picked up my shield, and I covered myself for a minute. And then as soon as the shooting stopped, I put the shield down, and I poked out the corner to shoot him, and he's gone. He wasn't there. So I looked down on the ground, and he's laying on the ground in a very unnatural position, and so what had happened, the guys in the parking lot, were, I wish I could give their names and give them credit, but very, very good cops, and they did a good job. But one of the SWAT elements had gone back down to the parking lot, and we'd carried SWAT, or Colt Commandos that were full auto, and the entire element, I think, pretty much did a brrr, brrr, and lit him up. And they literally shot his arm off. It was still attached just because it was in a jacket. He was on the ground. He had the gun he was holding and shooting. He landed on it, so it was underneath him. Then he had a shoulder holster with a gun. Then he had a gun in a holster on his waistband.
Justice.
So no cops were injured or killed. No innocent people were hurt. The only crazy thing is we had told all the people to evacuate to go to a lobby and be in a safe place where the cops were watching them. A couple of them went against that, and they went to their cars.
What?
And they reclined their cars, and they were taking a nap. And thank God they had the seats reclined, because through those side windows, some bullet holes had gone through.
Yeah.
So they were pretty fortunate.
I'll call that a win. Bad guy neutralized. Took a permanent nap. Cops good.
That was an adrenaline call, if you will.
Pucker factor.
Yeah.
The sphincter was so tight, couldn't pull a pin out of it with a team of wild horses.
I just remember seeing those two cops, and I know them well. I see those two cops coming up with their guns and seeing them firing, and I'm like, I'm right next to this dude.
I should take cover.
I should use my shield.
Well, I'm going to go with a gross story because I don't have one that's that cool. So one morning, if you know anyone who's a good electrician, I could probably put him to work here with my lighting system down here. So we get a call we were in briefing, I think, this morning. And we get a call 911, and I think it's a domestic. So one of our guys he was happened to be driving by, and he's like, well, I'm on scene. He goes up, and next thing we hear him on the radio screen, I got shots fired, I'm going in. Like, holy cow. So I'd already started that way. I'm about a block away. Long story short, kind of a messy domestic. Sad in that there was two kids, 4 or 5 years old, in a bedroom at the end of a house. And then at the other end of the house, this guy was he had made his garage into like a music studio, workshop. He's in there and he's arguing with his wife. His wife is one who had called 911, and she's telling him, so the line's still open, don't do it. And he's like, well, I've got nothing to live for. And she's like, da, da, da. So what had happened is he had a 30-06 rifle, and he had it down. He was trying to put it in his mouth, and she was grabbing onto the barrel trying to pull it away. And while she was doing that, he gets it, and he hits the trigger, boom, right? So his head's
hit her, hit him.
Hit him.
Oh.
Yeah, so his head was missing from the bottom teeth up. She was obviously traumatized, splatter and spray all over the place. So anyway, that's the sad part. The not humorous, but kind of gross part. And if you've been in the business, sometimes you make humor of things that aren't necessarily humorous, but whatever they say, it's a coping mechanism. So I show up after the fact, and it's all done, and he's slumped down in there. My brain justifies it, or not justifies it, makes it look. Dead people look like Halloween decorations to me. So I don't know if that's a self-defense mechanism or a defense mechanism, whatever. But anyway, so I'm walking in there. I'm standing just outside of this workroom in this little narrow hallway, and all of a sudden I feel this on my shoulder. I'm like, what the heck is that? I look over, and it's part of his brain matter that fell off the ceiling and landed on my shoulder. And for whatever reason, that struck me as hilarious at the time and gross. So that was kind of a weird one.
I have almost identical. Only it wasn't a domestic. A guy that was an older guy and had some terminal illness or whatever, but he was just living in pain. I feel for him. He ended up committing suicide. He took a very, very high-powered handgun, like the Clint Eastwood gun or whatever those things are, 44 mag or something.
44 mag, the most powerful handgun.
And I don't know why, but I just happened to be like a block away from the call when the call came out. So he was in his bedroom, and I got on scene so quick. His wife knew what had happened, so she didn't even go back and look. She was just in the kitchen crying, and she's like, he's back there. And open up the bedroom door, and I go to step in, and brain and skull is falling from the ceiling like it's raining. You know what I mean? Pieces had stuck in the ceiling, but parts of it that had stuck are starting to fall. And you go to walk in, and you're like, You look up, and you're like, I'm not going in here. All this stuff landing on top of me. It was almost identical.
All right, so we're getting down to the wire now. It's a close competition. I think, I'm a little biased, but I think I'm winning on points here. So anyway, I want to ask you about a specific one, and then I'm going to end with a bizarre, obscene story, if you will. So you told me a while back, and I've known you for a few years, and you told me how you had saved a guy's life who had suffered some sort of neck trauma, and by actually doing some creative medical procedure.
We call that one. I don't know why they came up with this name. I guess it happened at Christmas. We called it the Christmas Day Massacre, and it wasn't really a massacre. Okay, but
that's not funny. But
no, it's not. And I think the chances of any family ever watching this is probably pretty slim. But anyway, we're working. This is when I was in the city I'm in now. And there was a disturbance in the middle of the street. One of the cops, really, really good cop, saw this guy and girl verbally arguing in the middle of the street, so he stops to intervene. No crime had happened. They're just lovers' quarrel, just getting a little hot-headed. So, trying to remember the details. It was his apartment that was on that street, and she had stayed there a couple nights, so she wanted to go home. And so she asked, would we just walk with her back up there while she grabbed some of her belongings? So we said yes, and do what's like a civil standby or whatever. So we walk him back to the apartment, and the whole time we walk him back, they're touchy-feely. Like they're walking next to each other, they're rubbing shoulders, they're almost holding hands, they're whispering to each other, and they had a fight, but you could tell they're still into each other. Mm-hmm. So we get to the apartment, and she says, would you guys mind waiting outside so we can talk a little bit? And we're like, are you sure? And she's like, yes, just wait outside. You can keep the door open, but I'm just going to grab some stuff. So we're sitting in the hallway. She's grabbing some stuff. You can kind of overhear what they're doing. And they're doing their little, lovey-dovey talk, like, oh, I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you, whatever. Anyway, she comes out with her stuff.
Stay faithful, I promise.
Yeah. She comes out with her stuff. And she says, she lives somewhere else. She said, I called my roommate to come pick me up, and he'll be here in just a minute. And we're like, do you want us to stick around? She's like, no, we're fine. Go, I'll be fine. So we leave, and our station was like a block away from this. So I literally went back to the station, went inside to go pee, and they do a tone alert, which is when something urgent's going on. And they aired that same block that we were just on, that there was a stabbing, and the suspect was a male wearing a red hoodie holding a big knife. And the guy we just dealt with was a big dude wearing a red hoodie. So I'm like, there's no way. I mean, of course it has to be because we were just there. But we go screw it back. And apparently from the time we left, when her male roommate showed up, it must have made him jealous or something. He stabbed the roommate. I think he ended up living, but he was messed up. He stabbed him with, seriously, one of those butcher kitchen knives. Stabbed him in the stomach and chest several times, I think. He stabbed the girl in the heart, and she was dead right there. I'll never get that image out of my head, but the way she collapsed was very unnatural. Like she was dead instantly because he hit her in the heart. So she collapsed. Some of what I'm telling you is hindsight. I didn't know this at the time when I got there. I didn't know the roommate had been stabbed. I didn't know that she was laying dead right there on the sidewalk. But he had slit his throat.
The suspect.
The suspect. Okay. Yeah. So he had slit his own throat. Well, we get there, and I didn't see any of the blood because he was wearing a red hoodie. So I get on scene, and I see the guy, and he's standing there holding the knife. He's like holding it like this. And this other officer, and we confront him, and we had a good L on him. And I had my taser out, and he was kind of walking this way, so I was this way with him. And I'm giving him commands. And he's got that 1,000-yard stare. He's not really paying attention. And he stops, and he's holding the knife, and he turns, and he faces me, and he starts bringing the knife up like this. Well, my partner, really good cop, has his gun out. He's lethal. I'm less lethal. And he's squeezing the trigger. He's getting ready to shoot this guy because he's facing me with the knife in an aggressive manner. Well, I hit him with the taser, and it worked. Dropped like a sack of potatoes. And like I said, I didn't know he had cut himself until he hits the ground, drops the knife, and then the pool of blood just from his neck. And I see when he hits the ground, he's laying on his side, and his neck kind of just opens. I mean, he did a good job. He cut. And I was like,
has a dispenser.
Yeah. So we have ambulances coming. I go over there, I put gloves on, and I go to put pressure on the wound. Where he's told, put pressure on the wound. I go put pressure on the wound, and my hand sinks in. So why
didn't you do a tourniquet?
Yeah. God, I wish I would have thought of that in hindsight, right? Mm-hmm. So I go to put pressure on it, and my hand sinks into about here, and I'm like, oh! And the feeling inside of his neck was this really gross, like granularly feeling. I didn't expect that on the inside of his neck. So anyway, my hand's buried in his neck, and I'm putting pressure on whatever the
carotid, jugular.
Yeah, you're the guy that knows that stuff. So anyway, the ambulance comes. They load him up. He's trying to push my hand away, and he's like telling me, "Let me die, let me die." And I'm like, "No, buddy, we're not gonna let you die." So the ambulance comes, load him up, and they're working on him so much. They're like, "We need you to ride in the ambulance and keep pressure." Yeah. So I got gloves on, and the whole ambulance there, you're kind of straddling because you're doing all these bumps, and you have your hand buried in this dude's neck, and trying to keep pressure on it and stuff. And then they tell me later, they're like, "He lived, and it was because you put pressure on it." And I was like, "Oh, yay." And like I said, at the time, I didn't know he had just killed the girl and then attempted to kill this other guy. So it was a catch-22. I was like, it's great if you can save somebody's life, but then you're like, oh, I saved the guy's life who just murdered somebody and then tried to murder someone else.
Yeah, that's the irony of it. I think every life-saving word I have is, it's never like some soccer mom who was involved in an accident and you save her life after she's, or some choking kid or something like that. All the awards I've received over the years have been like, people that are just have constant run-ins with law enforcement, stuff like that. Yeah. All right, so we're running out of time because we have a unscheduled guest who's made an appearance. Stick your ugly mug in here real quick. Maybe a future guest on the podcast. The man, the myth, the legend, Tito the Bandito, who started all this.
He started it all.
He started it. He's at fault for this. So, all right, I'm going to end with a story. And this is your trigger warning. It may trigger you or something like that. So, this was in a different jurisdiction. It's like Sunday morning, Monday morning. Anyway, I'm driving by this low-income apartment complex. There was actually like Quonset hunts that had been transformed into apartments. And out in the middle of this field, I see this old hoopty, like some 1975 Buick. It's a big, big boat of a car. I'm like, that's not a parking spot. I don't usually see cars there, so I'm going to go check it out. So I called out, and I pull up behind him, and I'm watching, and I see it's occupied one-time driver. And I see this male, I assume this little smaller stature, but I can see his shoulders moving around from my position behind the car. So I get out, I walk up, and I post up at like the B pillar, C pillar, whatever, and I'm trying to just kind of look in there, and he's oblivious. He doesn't see me there, my flashing lights or anything like that. He seems very preoccupied looking down by his knees, and I can see him like moving around and jerking around and struggling. I'm like, what is this guy doing? So I bang on the window, boom, boom, boom. Police department. Doesn't pay any attention to me. I'm like, wow, he's really focused on what he's doing. Boom, boom, boom. Police department. Nothing. So I walk up to the driver's side window, which is not open, it's closed, and I pound on him a couple times. And he looks back at me real quick, and I see him throw something to the floorboard. And all I caught out of my peripheral was just something white being thrown to the floorboard. I'm like, what the heck? So I draw my gun. The area I worked at, we drew our guns anytime we were suspicious. So I draw my gun out, and I like to tell him, Manos Arriba, put your hands up. Get out of the car, and at this time my partner's showing up, and I get him out, and he's got his pants down by his ankles, and he's got blood scratches all up and down his thighs. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So I get him to the back of the car, and he doesn't habla inglés, so I'm trying my best to do my street Spanish with him. I don't know what's going on, so we cuff him just for grins until I figure out. And I go back to the car, and I look, and there's this chicken flopping around on the floorboard. And the chicken doesn't make it, sadly. And this is before animal abuse was a felony in our state. But what had happened was this poor, lonely young man who apparently was struggling with finding a lady friend had decided that this chicken needed some loving. And I had rolled up and caught him in the act of trying to fuck a chicken. Non-consensually, thus the scratches and blood up and down his thighs. So I have the distinct honor of having the first and only that I'm aware of chicken fucker story. The chicken didn't make it. And,
did you have chicken for dinner?
I did not have chicken for dinner. And it changes the term, smells like, tastes like chicken. So anyway, that was a long time ago. And
you just reminded me of a good one, but I'll let you.
I don't know what we did with him. what the end result was. Chicken didn't make it, but yeah, that was kind of bizarre. So anyway, you guys kind of keep tabs and tell us whose stories won this poker game of stories. We could go on for hours, but we want to kind of keep it short for today. So I appreciate him being here and sharing his stories. He's got a lot more that he's forgotten about, or I don't know, didn't come to his head because he's told me some, and just bizarre all the stuff he's been involved in. It's kind of a glimpse into the day in life of a cop, and we'll try to do some more. I don't have time. I'll get back on my rant about lowering standards and all that stuff next time. But hey, we appreciate you tuning in. Let us know your thoughts and other things you want to see, and we'll get some more guests on here and do some more story sharing. So until the next time.